Hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where usually I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. But today I'm actually going to talk about what it's making me because I just finished my very first year on YouTube, and we're going to go through all of the numbers, including views and subscribers over time, but also how much money I made off YouTube this year, because I know that's what we're all the most curious about, right? So before we jump in today, as far as my mug and tea of the day, this is my Courtney Zimmerman mug with its cute rainbow handle, and I'm drinking my favorite Sloan Classic Earl Grey tea. So I want to do this video today for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, I know that a lot of people are curious about the idea of starting their own knitting podcast or any kind of YouTube channel, depending on who maybe this video has found its way to. But also, to be honest with you, I wanted to make this video just because I'm nosy, and I know that I would want to know these things, and I know that because I in fact watched a video exactly like this last year by Knits by Mandy, and that's honestly what actually got the gears turning in my head about starting a channel, even though I had no real previous plans of doing that. So listen, I think it's okay to be nosy, and even if you have no aspirations of starting a channel on your own, I'm here to indulge your nosiness for the next little bit. So first, let's lay some groundwork background context. So I posted my first video on January 21st of 2024, and I've been posting every other week regularly since then. In the first few months, there was a little bit of extra time between some videos when I was just trying to figure out like which day of the week worked best for me for posting, just as far as how that impacted the schedule working back from that and when I was actually doing my filming and my editing. But I put out 27 videos in the first 12 months of my channel. So if you're unfamiliar with how you actually start making money from a YouTube channel, you have to get monetized, as it's called. Your channel isn't making money by default. There's a couple of different pieces of criteria you have to hit. So first is that you need to hit 1,000 subscribers. And second is that you have to hit 4,000 total watch hours, meaning the amount of cumulative time that people have spent watching your videos. And this is an interesting piece of criteria because I think how achievable it is really depends on the kind of content that you have. So for me, having a knitting podcast where videos tend to skew long, like they're usually between 35 minutes to an hour, you rack up a lot of watch time per viewer per video. So I do suspect that that worked to my favor a little bit, but still it did take me longer to hit that criteria than the first one. And we'll get more into the details of subscribers over time in a minute. But for now, the important thing for you to know is that I posted my first video on January 21st, and my channel hit both those criteria to get monetized at the very end of February, which, to be honest with you, is way sooner than I thought that it would. I think that the algorithm did a lot of heavy lifting in the early days of my channel. Not my very first video, but my second and third videos got sort of sent out into the YouTube ether way more than I would have expected. So I feel like I have to chalk a lot of that timing up to just the luck of the algorithm gods being nice to me. Of course, I think there are certain things that like I did well or that worked to my advantage, but I also know that like it's kind of a crapshoot sometimes. And I think there are a lot of people doing great stuff who just aren't getting the eyeballs that they deserve on their work. So I think it's a little bit of A, a little bit of B, and I just want to put that out there because I don't want anyone to get discouraged if your timeline to monetization is different than mine, because there's a very good chance that it will be, and different people's growth curves look very different. Like I had a pretty sharp spike at the start that got me monetized, but since then it's been a much slower, much more gradual curve upward. And then one last bit of context that I want to give you before we get into numbers is just a bit of a sense of like what actually goes into making one of these videos. And this is just going to be in very brief terms because I'm actually planning to do a part 2 of this video where I get into a lot more detail in the sort of behind the scenes process. So for now, I just want to lay out the context that it takes me about 10 hours to make each video from start to finish, like recording all the way through like doing the transcript and posting. So 10 hours multiplied by 27 videos, that puts us at about 270 hours invested into this, which is a lot. I mean, that is many weeks of a full-time job, right? What is that? So that's almost 7 40-hour weeks. That's almost 2 months of like a standard full-time job. That's a lot of hours. So we will revisit this number once we've looked at how much money I've made from the channel this year. Okay, so let's first look at subscribers over time. So starting with February. So because my first video went up end of January, this is like end of January to end of February is that first month. So in February, I was at 1,540 subscribers, which is so many more than I expected to have anywhere near that quickly. And this was kind of like a funny little thing at the start of my channel because my very first video got very little attention, right? It got, I think, like a couple hundred views initially maybe, and it got a handful of subscribers. And it had quite a high like subscriber rate per number of views. So I was really excited about that. But I was like, okay, it's obviously gonna take me a very long time to hit monetization. Now, I did have kind of like a trick up my sleeve for my second video because in the knitting podcast world, one of the absolute like heaviest hitters, biggest type of video is the everything I knit last year video, which people will usually post at the start of a new year. And so because it was kind of close to the start of the year still, and I was like, well, I've never posted a video of my knitting, so I can do not only everything I knit last year, but everything I've ever knit, because I've been knitting for I think like 2 years at that point. And so I was kind of hoping that if I made that my second video, it might up my odds of the algorithm kind of taking notice and sending my video out into the world. And this is where, you know, there's sort of been some like machinations going on here from the start. I was like, I don't want to make that my first video because I think there is a high likelihood that YouTube won't really care very much about my first video, and the algorithm will be more interested once it starts seeing that I'm planning to keep posting. And if that everything I knit video does get more attention, then there's another video on my channel already for people who really like that video to go back and watch, which increases my views, potentially helps increase subscribers, helps increase watch time. So there was a little bit of strategy going into that one, and it did work. I can't tell you for sure that that would work exactly the same way a second time. Like I said, I think there's always a lot of luck involved in the YouTube algorithm, but my theory, it did work this time. That second video got a lot more traction than the first one did. I think it got like maybe 2,000 or 3,000 views kind of within the first week or so. And at the time that was like, oh my God. And I was like, okay, that's way better than the first one did. And since then, that one has also kind of been like an evergreen video on my channel. So its view count now is well above that, but it did do quite well right out of the gate, like for a brand new video on a brand new channel. So after just those first two videos, I had hit the 1,000 subscriber threshold to get monetized. But at that point I still needed some watch hours. And it was my third video. I think that like, I will be knitting this cardigan until the end of time video. It did wildly well compared to the second one. I think the algorithm was like, oh, okay, something's going on here. People are liking the second video a lot. Let's push out this third one too and see if it can gain a similar traction. And so we'll look at that one more when we're getting into stats by individual videos. But like that one continues to be one of my absolute best viewed videos because the algorithm was just like really excited about, I guess, what it thought was a promising new channel. And then, you know, it promptly got kind of bored of me. But it was that third video that tipped me over into hitting the 4,000 hours of watch time. So that was the video that at the end of February got me monetized. From that point on, I was accruing money from YouTube AdSense. So February, we had 1,540 subscribers. So that jump happened very quickly. By March, it was 1,810. So you can see how the growth curve has started to level off, right? We're not growing at that same like wild rate that it was at the very beginning when the algorithm was like, oh my God, new channel, show it to people. And then it's really slowed down by April where it's at 1,860. In May, it's 2,010. In June, it's 2,070. So this was sort of the most like sloggy part of building the channel. And it was like, okay, I've just gotten monetized. And suddenly my videos are not doing as well as they were before. So this was a part where it was like, okay, it's a good thing I'm enjoying doing this. I'm just going to keep doing this consistently as long as I'm enjoying doing it, and we'll see what happens over time. Now, July, things really picked up. Suddenly it jumps up to 3,130. August is slower again at 3,260. And from there, it's been fairly consistent in its rate. 3,740 in September, 3,900 in October, 4,350 November, 4,760 December. And then on the 1 year anniversary of my channel, it was at 5,150 subscribers for the first year, which like is well above what I would have expected when I started my channel. I wish that I had like written down kind of like predictions or goals for the first year. And I mean, not goals in that way feels dangerous because these are goals that are outside of your control, right? Like you can put in all of the effort, but it doesn't mean that you're gonna get a certain number of subscribers back. But I just wish that I could remember like exactly what I sort of thought would be like reasonable benchmarks for me to hit. Like what would I be like really excited about versus what would I just like hope that if I put that much time in that I would hit eventually, you know? So I don't know for sure, and it's possible that I'm just sort of like retrofitting this, but in my head, I think that 5,000 is the number that I had in my head of like, if this is going really well, by the end of the first year, maybe I'll have 5,000 subscribers. So to sit here knowing that that actually happened in the first year, I'm like, wow, this went really well. Like I feel like the way this has gone is basically the best case scenario that I could have thought. I mean, there are knitting podcasts that I like to watch that by this time in their channel were bigger than my channel is now. Not that we're not supposed to compare, I know, blah, blah. But I just think it can be interesting sometimes to look at these things. And when I've done that, I've also found that usually those channels, while maybe they were only around for a year at the time they were hitting these higher numbers, they were also posting more than I was. Because this is a huge factor, right? Obviously, how often you post on YouTube is gonna have a big impact on your numbers. So I really have no like, oh, why do they have more subscribers than I do after the same amount of time? Because I'm like, because I'm posting half as much as they are. And I also don't wish to post more. Like this is something that I have kept very front of mind the whole time in working on my channel as far as like how much time am I willing to put into this. Like I said, it takes me about 10 hours to put together a video. So right now that's about 5 hours a week. And usually what I actually do is I do it all in 1 week. So I kind of have like a YouTube week and a non-YouTube week, which I like because I have other stuff, you know, like I have other interests, I have other hobbies, and I don't want this to be my whole thing or to take over everything else. So for me, every other week has been a really sustainable cadence that I like doing. So I feel like that is a really key part of all this, because as far as I have heard, as far as I understand, I think YouTube really rewards consistency. So I think you are way better off posting, even if it's every 3 weeks, every month. I think you are way better off doing that than kind of posting a few like rapid fire in a flurry and then not posting for 7 months. So I think like finding the cadence that works for you is really important. And for me, it's every 2 weeks. Okay, so now that we've looked at subscribers over time, let's layer on views over time so you can sort of see how they are correlated in sort of a broad sense, but it's not like an exact like one line tracking the other perfectly, because there are just some videos that perform differently as far as like maybe more people see it, but they're not people who are likely to subscribe. So for example, in November, I did a video that was like gift guide for knitters, which, you know, could easily be useful to people who are not knitters, who are just shopping for one, but who would have no interest in subscribing to a knitting YouTube channel, right? So again, with views, much like subscribers, we came in hot February, 19,700 views. So that was split between a few videos, right? In March, we added 6,400 views. In April, 3,700. May, 4,750, and June, 3,800. So you can see we're sort of doing this like thing that is nowhere near where February was, right? So we are past that initial algorithm boost, and for there, it's like, okay, we're kind of on our own here, just working away for a while, trying to build this up gradually. And then in July, the same month where there was that noticeable subscriber boost, there's also a noticeable views bump. So this month was 10,400 views, followed by 6,400 in August and 11,700 in September. October is down a little bit at 9,100, and then back up in November at 12,800, and then 13,000 in December. January closing out the year at 13,400. So you can see how we had that really sharp spike at the beginning from the algorithm. And then from there, it was on a not entirely consistent, but fairly clear overall upward incline. And so as I sit here recording this, I have not yet made any of the graphs that I'm planning to be showing you while I'm telling you all these things. So let's hope that by the time you're seeing this, I have made some really nice graphs for you. And let's see if I can make one where things are like large enough to be legible to you, where I pop in what videos went up at what time along this timeline, just so we can get a rough sense of how that correlates to our views. Has past me succeeded in that? You will know before I do. What I do have in front of me right now, though, is the list of my videos by view count as of the 1-year anniversary of the channel. So let's look at the top ranked videos and how they did. So my #1 video on the channel still is that episode number 3 that the algorithm was just like, yes, go run with it. So that is now at 12,784 views, which is wild, particularly because you'll see as we go through the other top ranking videos, this is the only like regular podcast update episode that is among the best performing videos. All the other best performing videos are the sort of special format ones, you know, like seasonal knitting plans, everything I knit, and the regular podcast episodes that are just like, here's my bi-weekly update of what I've been knitting. Those just don't tend to perform quite as well. So it's just fascinating that this is the one that is still at the top of this list. And then #2 is the 10 knitting podcasts I recommend episode, which I did not expect that to do that well. I made that video because I was going to be like away or busy for a few weekends in a row or something. And I just needed a video that I could pre-record. I needed a video where I didn't need to have to be showing like project updates, because I was gonna be recording it very shortly after I had recorded a last project update. So like nothing would have happened in between. And I'd seen a few other people do videos like that. A few people have been nice enough to include me in their videos like that. And I was like, I like this idea. So I just sort of banked that as an idea that I could pull out at some point when I needed a video that didn't require me to have done any knitting. It was just like a practical choice. And I was shocked by how well it did. And this is one that has continued to do well. Like this one is very evergreen. It's not seasonal. Just anytime people are typing into the YouTube search bar, knitting podcast recommendations, it might pop up, and that's continued to help it out. So it's currently at 12,060 views. Next behind that one is my Everything I Ever Knit. So this is my second video I posted, and it's currently sitting at 11,547 views. So this is another one that is pretty evergreen, right? This is the kind of video that when someone finds a new knitting podcast channel, they're very likely to go watch this as one of the first videos to kind of get caught up or just get a sort of good overall sense of that knitter and their channel and what they're like. It's just a good go-to. And like, I have watched Everything I've Knit videos from people who I don't subscribe to because it's just a format that I tend to really like. And even if someone's particular style and delivery isn't my absolute favorite and not something I want to watch every week or every other week in just a standard knitting podcast episode, I do still like watching the Everything I Knit. So I think that that gives this kind of a video a big boost. And now sitting here, I'm like, I'm not gonna like read you out the view count of each of these. You can see them on the nice graph that I have presumably now made for you. But the next best performing video was my fall knitting plans. So apparently people care more about fall knitting plans than winter knitting plans, or just very specifically mine. And it's hard to say. I have a case study of one here, but my winter knitting plans is ranked a couple below this one. And sitting in between them is the No Frills Cardigan project vlog that I did, where I sort of cut together all my project updates from all the like 1 million knitting podcast episodes that had appeared in up to that point, putting them all together and then doing kind of like a final update / conclusion at the end of it, so that it's there as a resource for anyone looking to knit the No Frills cardigan. So I think that that one has been served well by being like anyone who's just typing in no frills cardigan, like that is a very obvious search result to click on that's like, this is gonna tell you everything about this cardigan. So that has made that one kind of more evergreen than the way that I typically talk about my projects in progress also. So behind that one is the winter knitting plans, followed by my everything I knit this year that I just posted like a few weeks ago. And honestly, I'm surprised that this one ranked as low as it did, just because the everything I knit video tends to be such a big video, but it just did not compare to the other ones this time around. I don't know, maybe my thumbnail was not up to snuff this time. I don't know, I was just shocked that so many of these other videos got more views. And there is also a time factor here, right? So the earlier in the year that I published a video, the more time it's had to accrue views. And so like I said, like some videos are more evergreen than others. Like the podcast recommendation videos is getting more views a few months later than a lot of other types of episodes do a few months later. And this video has not had the benefit of any of that, right? And now interestingly, so because I pulled these stats on the first year anniversary of the channel, these stats would look a little bit different if my very last video that went up were included, because I think these stats were like the day that went up or like maybe the day after, but it has now already surpassed my everything I knit last year video, which again, I'm shocked about because it's just like a normal podcast update episode. So like, while we can definitely see a trend here in the type of video that tends to do the best, there are also just weird outliers where sometimes the algorithm just has like a mind of its own. And you're like, okay, thanks. I don't get it, but thank you. And then after my everything I knit this year, the next best videos were my gift guide video, followed by my episode where I talked about Knit City Toronto, because I think that's a thing that sort of at the time of that event, people were just like searching for videos about that. It was sort of topical. And then at the bottom of the list, because I think that's all my like special format episodes, is just like the best performing standard format podcast update video, which happened to be like one of the newer ones because the channel has grown over time. So that makes sense. So those are the ones that did the best. Let's look at the ones that did the worst, just because I think it's funny. So actually, I lied. My 10 best videos did not include all of my special format videos, because my absolute worst performing video is my reviewing my knits on vacation, everything I took with me on my Italy trip. And this one, I don't care at all that it didn't do well, because this was originally just supposed to be like a segment in my like regular format podcast update episode, and it just was running way, way too long. So I was like, hey, I can cut it into an extra video, and that's that much less time it will take me to make another video. Awesome. So I found it fun to make. I think the people who did watch it liked it. I got some really interesting comments on that one, but yeah, was it the best performing on my channel? Absolutely not. That one is still sitting at 1,372 views. And then not far above that one is my knitting the perfect dog walking gloves video. People have no interest in knitting dog walking gloves. I really thought that having copper in the thumbnail for this one would give it a good boost. It did not. YouTube did not care about my dog. And then just slightly above that one is another update where I talked about the gloves. And now I think also like these ones just happened to fall in that kind of initial slump where the algorithm was like bored of me, and then I was kind of scraping my way up from there. So I think a lot of this is just timing. I don't think it's necessarily specifically that I was knitting dog walking gloves that no one cared about, but maybe also that, who knows? So in making YouTube videos, there are a few different ways you can make money, but the main one, the most obvious one, is from YouTube AdSense. So this is what you're gaining access to when you get monetized, right? This is when people watching your videos will see ads, and then you get money for getting people's eyeballs onto those ads. And this is a thing where it's very hard to estimate how much different YouTubers are making, because different videos will make different amounts of money per view. There's not like a consistent rate. And this is because the way that the ads work is that the advertisers are basically bidding in like an auction style system on videos, and also not like manually. Like they're not like watching my video and like fighting for a spot on my video. It's just like, this is the type of content we want. This is what our audience watches. You know, it's all sort of algorithms and whatever. But so the amount that you make per view on a video depends on how valuable of advertising space your video has been deemed to be. And so some videos will be more lucrative than others for the same number of views, just depending on how that auction has shaken out and how valuable of ad space that video has been perceived to be. The other interesting thing about AdSense is that despite the fact that I got monetized at the end of February, things move slowly. So like March was my first month where I was eligible to be collecting money from videos. So like whatever amount of money I accrue between the beginning of March and the end of March, we have our number. And now it's not until April 20th that that money is actually processed and makes its way to my bank account. So some money, like money that was earned at the beginning of March, is taking more than a month to get to me, and potentially even longer, because there's also a minimum payout threshold. So AdSense doesn't actually send you a bank transfer until you've accrued $100. Below that, they're like, you can wait. So you could be sitting there accumulating money in AdSense for months before any of it hits your bank account. So is it a cash quick scheme? Absolutely not. Do not recommend. So given that, despite the fact that March was the first month that I was actually accruing AdSense revenue, I didn't actually see any of that money until May because it took March and April for me to hit that minimum payout threshold. And then again, money that you earned in April doesn't hit your bank account until late May. Now there's also, there's a lot of sort of like fiddly details in the money where like in YouTube, in your AdSense account, it'll tell you you're earning this much money. And that's not actually the amount of money that hits your bank account for a couple different reasons. So one is that for me, there's a currency exchange thing going on, right? YouTube is operating in US dollars. I'm Canadian. They're paying me in Canadian dollars into a Canadian bank account, which means that the amount that they show me in YouTube, in theory, they're actually going to pay me a higher number than that because it will convert out to more Canadian dollars, except that they also withhold taxes before they give it to me. YouTube has this strange setup where they basically estimate your percentage of American viewers and then withhold a percentage of your income to tax it, like as taxes for the IRS, like for the US, based on how much of your money is coming from American viewers, which doesn't really make sense to me because like as a self-employed graphic designer, I work with a lot of clients in the US and that's not how tax laws work on anything else. We don't pay taxes to the IRS just because our clients are American. So I don't really understand what YouTube is doing there. Like of the money that I make from YouTube, I do still have to report that as part of my income taxes that I file here in Canada. So this isn't just like free pocket change either, right? It has to go through income taxes the same way all the rest of the money that I earn in my life has to. So that's just like a weird thing to be prepared for. Know that YouTube is going to take a decent chunk of your revenue every single month and send it to the IRS for reasons sort of unknown. But so all the numbers that I'm giving you today, these are the actual numbers of Canadian dollars that hit my personal bank account. So this is like the actual amount of money that I actually got after all the weird stuff that YouTube does. So this is different than the number that my YouTube account is like, this is how much money you made this month. It's not that number. It's the actual money that I actually got. And again, to not just sound like an Excel spreadsheet here, I'm not going to give you the like to US dollar conversion on every single number, but I will give it to you in the end on the total just to help give you a sense of scale, assuming there's a higher likelihood you're familiar with US dollars. But just as a rule of thumb, as we're going along, the US dollar number would be about 2/3 of the number that I'm giving you. So I got that very first YouTube AdSense payment in May, and that was $123.63 Canadian. And that was very exciting. I was like, oh my God, it's real money. So again, it took me 2 months to accrue up to over that $100 threshold to actually get a payout. And then it took me another 2 months to get another one. So I didn't get my next payment until July, which was for $130.83. So very similar, just a little bit more than the last one. But then August, I got $131.08, which is not a lot more on the payment, but it didn't take me 2 months to accrue at that time. So that was really exciting to hit that in just 1 month. I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. And then that kept going. I made a little bit less in September, but still enough to hit the threshold. So that was $104.98. And then there was a real uptick in October. This was $207.47. And as I'm getting these payments, I'm in my budget filing them under my like yarn budget. And so I'm like, oh, I'm like really accumulating yarn money. This is very exciting. November was down a little bit at $169.90, but then December was back up at $228.09. And then my channel rounded out its first year with its best ever YouTube AdSense payment of $256.51. And so again, bear in mind that these are all like a month behind. So money I got paid in January was money earned in December and so on and so on. So this really makes sense because on YouTube, November and December are the most valuable in terms of ad revenue because it's the holidays and brands are just like throwing everything they've got at advertising to try to get people's holiday spending money and also to try to get like into the positive before the end of the year. So this is the time to make money on YouTube. This is why Vlogmas is a thing if you weren't aware. This is why people are incentivized to make more videos in December because it's the most lucrative time to make them. So that means that in my whole first year on YouTube, I made $1,352.49 Canadian, which converts out to $946.74 US, so just under 1,000, which I'm like so pleasantly surprised that it went that well in the first year. Now, this is maybe when we should revisit the hours spent because does this convert out to an hourly wage? Let's see. So let's take that number, $1,352 Canadian. And let's see how this compares to if I were working a minimum wage job with that same amount of time. So here in Ontario, minimum wage is $17.20. So if I had spent the time that I spent working on this podcast working at McDonald's instead, that's what I would have been making per hour. If we divide that amount that YouTube paid me by the roughly 270 hours that I estimate I've spent on the channel this year, that brings us out to around $5 an hour. So we are below 1/3 of minimum wage. Bravo. Now, the good news is that I had a lot more fun doing this than I would have working at a McDonald's, and I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't a hobby, right? Like, I'm obviously not doing this as a form of employment because as established by these numbers, that would be deranged. Like, at this current level, this is not paying as a job. This is paying as a hobby. So I will be doing this as long as I continue to find it fun. So in terms of those taxes, YouTube withheld from my earnings a total of $320.98 Canadian, which works out to $224.03 US. So like, that's not a small chunk, right? Compared to the amount that I actually made. Like, if you added that number to it, that's a pretty sizable bump. So just be prepared that if you're gonna start making money on YouTube, regardless of whether you live in the States, which I do not, the IRS is gonna take a cut. Just be ready. Now, in addition to YouTube AdSense, there are also other ways that you can make money making YouTube videos. And I've made a bit of money from that also. So let's add on to this graph a little bit. So one of the other main ways that you can make money from videos is through affiliate links. So this is when a content creator will share usually a special link to something that often will get you a discount, or you might use a coupon code instead of a special link. But this is just a way that when they are sharing something, they will get a little cut of the money from that sale as like a thank you from the business that you've referred them to. So for me, that's things like when I share my Keats & Co discount code, here it is if you want it. Also when I made that gift guide video, anything where I was able to create an affiliate link for that, I did. So affiliate links haven't started making me any money on the channel until very recently, in part because they tend to take a lot of time to go anywhere. Because first of all, there's a similar like accruing issue as there is with AdSense, where you don't get a payout until you hit a certain threshold. But with affiliate links, it's like even slower because you're often making like cents at a time of a transaction. Like sometimes it's more than that, sometimes it's multiple dollars, but in some cases it's literally like you're accruing pennies. So to hit any kind of payout threshold just takes forever. And then I've also found that even on ones where I am making more money per transaction, there's just this very long process that has to go through where it's like they don't even start processing it until a month later, but then it goes into this holding period where they don't want to approve it and grant it to you until like the customer definitely hasn't canceled or returned their order. And then it goes like onto the payout process. But like once it's in that process, it doesn't go out to like the end of the month. And so like I have been using affiliate links in some capacity since October, and I got $0 from affiliate stuff until January. So just on this very last month of the graph, we finally have a little bump of $112.03 Canadian that is affiliate revenue. And there's about $200 more that are sort of like trapped in the affiliate ether that I have technically earned, but probably will not see for months. And then another way people make money off YouTube, as I'm sure you know, you've probably watched many sponsored videos where the creator does sort of like a little ad in the middle of their video. And I got to do 2 of those this year, sort of the tail end of the year. So in November, I made $213.29 Canadian from that, and then another $213.82 in December, because they were both 150 US and the conversion was just slightly different, you know? So November, December are starting to look quite good on this graph. And then we have one more category still to add, which is a category of merch. So this is the one that's the most sort of up to the creator. But because I'm a graphic designer, I was like, it's pretty easy and low upfront investment for me to create some designs. All it takes is my own time. And clearly, based on the hourly rate that I've been accepting for this, I don't seem to care all that much about that. Anyways, so I created a couple of designs. Here they are, shameless self-promo. And I launched an Etsy shop for these. And we'll look at these numbers in a sec. This is kind of funny because this is one of those things where hindsight's 2020. You're really picking a trade-off. When you're setting up an online shop, there are a lot of services, including ones I've used in the past. I've used Big Cartel. And those ones will have like a monthly fee that you pay for their service. And so on individual transactions, you're only paying the like standard credit card processing fee. You're not paying like a fee to Big Cartel every time that you make a transaction. But it does mean that if you're not making any sales that month, or not enough to cover the subscription fee, which isn't a lot, it's like $10 or $15, but if you're not selling anything or not selling stuff with much of a profit margin, that can easily mean you're making no money or even paying money to have a shop open. So the benefit of Etsy is that the upfront costs are very, very small. It's like cents to list something, and it's only when you make a sale that you get hit with fees. So the good thing about that is that you're not ever going to be out of pocket for sales you didn't make. But they do take big fees. And honestly, when I set up my Etsy shop, like I've had one in the past, their fees have gone up a lot since the last time I had an Etsy shop. And they are taking a larger cut than I thought that they were going to. I clearly should have read the fine print more. So my profit margins are significantly smaller than I thought that they were. Because bear in mind that any percentage they take is a percentage of the total merchandise price that people are paying, right? And not a percentage of your profit margin. So if their percentage is a big chunk of your profit margin percentage, suddenly they've eaten most of your profit. So So we don't love that. But at the same time, as you'll see in a sec when we get into the exact numbers, when I first launched the merch, it kind of got an initial like flurry of interest. So in that month, it would have made way more sense for me to have a big cartel shop. But in the months since, it would have been much more sort of like touch and go, whether it made sense to be paying a monthly amount. So I'm still kind of on the fence about whether I should move that over. I'm feeling right now like if I was going to have one, the time to do that would have been for the launch, and that ship has sailed because things have slowed down since the launch. But maybe if at some point it sort of slowly builds itself up into something a little bit more consistent, then I might make the switch. But I don't think that that makes sense to do right now. But all that said, what is my actual profit from the Etsy shop so far? So I launched it in November in my gift guide video. So in November, I made $195.78. And then in December, it definitely slowed down a bit to $59.60. Then in January, we've made a whole $4.41. So you can see there is a definite spike with the launch, much like with the launch of my channel. It's a very similarly shaped graph. But the thing is, like, that's a thing where I put in all the work already and getting it set up. So from here on out, any money that I make from that shop is just like bonus. Like, I'm not putting in any new work to make those sales or keep that going. So that's nice. And also the money earned from the Etsy shop is going to be a little bit higher than it looks from these numbers, because when people buy through my affiliate link to my Etsy shop, which is how I share it, if you get to my Etsy shop from any way that I have sent you, it is going through an affiliate link. So in theory, I'm also making a cut of it that way, but I just haven't seen any of that money yet because that's some of the, many affiliate dollars that are caught up in the ether currently still. But I think there's probably about another $100 of that like 200-ish outstanding that is directly like associated with the Etsy shop. So I think we can kind of like spiritually tack that on there as well, as far as like what has the Etsy shop made this year. So reviewing those other categories, affiliate money is in at $112.03 for the year, which converts to $78.42 US. The Etsy shop totals in at $252.79 Canadian, or $176.95 US. And sponsorships is $427.11 Canadian, or $300 US. Which brings our grand total of the channel for the year, drumroll please, to $2,144.42 Canadian, or $1,501.09 US. So like, again, that is better than I expected it to go in the first year. Like, again, I really thought that I was going to spend most of this year like trying to get monetized. So I'm really happy with this result. Actually, let's see. We're still not at minimum wage, but let's see how far off we are now. Okay, our hourly rate has gotten better. It is now $7.94 Canadian. So we are now more than a third of minimum wage, but less than half, $17.20 Canadian. Also converted out to US, that's $5.56 US, which I know is well believed the US federal minimum wage also, but when I was looking, it looked like there were some states that like were exceptions and were maybe not very far off from that. So that's alarming, but So that's what the channel has grossed for the year. But I also definitely spent money on things related to the channel. So as far as expenses go, did this pay for my knitting? Did my hobby pay for itself? How does that shake out? Let's look at it. So obviously my biggest expense of the year is yarn. You need yarn to knit with. Yarn is expensive. So this year I spent $813.89 on yarn. I also bought a little handheld sewing machine back in February of last year that I still have not sat myself down to figure out how to use. So that was clearly a really good purchase. But that I definitely file as an expense, in part because it's knitting related. So I think those all factor into me, but also because I literally was like extra motivated by the idea of talking about it on the channel and like figuring out if it was a good option and like if other people would want to have it. Like, I really thought it would be good to review. So sorry I haven't done that. But it cost $50.94. And then the little tripod adapter that I use to hold my phone, that cost $25.92. I would have had absolutely no reason to buy that without this channel. I spent $22.58 on admission to Knit City Toronto, the yarn event that I went to this year. I spent $73.31 on Ravelry for all the different knitting patterns that I bought throughout the year. I spent $19.99 on a piece of software that I needed to make my podcast recommendations video, because it's software that allows you to download high-res versions of YouTube videos, because I wanted to be able to include clips in my video. And there are tools online that let you do this, but most of them kind of only let you do like one or two at a high quality before it starts being like, hey, pay us, or like, hey, now it's gonna be worse quality, hey, we're gonna downgrade you. So I was like, no, I'm just gonna pay $20 to be able to do this smoothly, and like I'll probably use this for other things related to the channel in the future, so like it's fine. It's an expense. And thankfully that video did well enough that I feel like it justifies it. And then the most expensive thing that the channel did kind of force me to spend money on is that I had to upgrade my Dropbox storage, because video files take up so much room. If I kept them all stored entirely on my computer's hard drive, there would be room for nothing else. And I'm not even keeping all of the raw files. Like, I'm not planning to go back and like recut old videos, so I don't need all of that original footage. But even still, I had to upgrade from my 1 terabyte plan that I had before, that I still had some extra space in holding all my design work and other stuff on my computer, up to 2 terabytes. And I, the other day, had to go find some stuff to delete still to keep from having to upgrade to the 3 terabyte plan. So that upgrade cost me $73.76, and that's gonna be an annual thing. And will probably go up over time because the amount of video space that I need to store will go up over time. So that's just a thing to be aware of if you're thinking of starting a channel. If you don't want to just be deleting every single file related to all your videos as soon as they're live on YouTube, you're gonna need storage for them, and that storage space is gonna add up quickly. And then there are other things that would be in the expense category if I didn't happen to already have them for other reasons or get them gifted. So for instance, the light that I'm using here was a Christmas present. Now I may do without one for almost the first whole year on my channel, just relying on natural light, but it is nice to be able to film even when natural light isn't good. So that's a thing that could easily be an expense for a channel. I also got a better microphone for Christmas. So again, that's a thing I didn't have to spend money for, but some people might. And then I also didn't have to spend any money on video editing software because as a graphic designer, I already pay for the whole Adobe Creative Suite because I need it for work. So I use Adobe Premiere to edit my videos in, but I have that functionally for free because I already have it. That said, there is free video editing software that comes installed on a computer, either iMovie on a Mac, or I think Windows Movie Maker. Is that still a thing? But they are definitely more kind of like beginner geared. Not that I'm doing anything advanced though is the thing. I just prefer the interface of Premiere Pro. I just find it a bit easier to do things a little bit more precisely, but it's absolutely not something you like need to be paying for to make videos. I just want to acknowledge that like that's a thing I use that would be an expense under other circumstances. So with all that together, that brings our expenses to $1,080.39 Canadian, or $756.27 US. So if we compare that to the money that the channel brought in this year, the difference, as in my overall profit for the year, is $1,064.03 Canadian, or $742 US. So I'm very happy that my hobby has officially paid for itself, right? It covered all of my yarn for the year, all of my yarn events, all my patterns, and then some. I do remember thinking when I started the channel, I hope that by the end of my first year, it has paid for my yarn. I remember thinking that felt attainable, but like, you know, would require the algorithm like helping me a little. You know, there are channels who grind it out for much longer than a year before they really make anything. But I do remember hoping that would happen, and I'm so happy that that happened, and that there's some extra left over, and like enough that I feel like I can no longer just funnel all the money from this channel into my yarn budget, because I don't need that much money for yarn. So I'm like, okay, I should probably like funnel this to some more responsible places or just like other fun places. But you know, it's really fun to me that the channel actually paid for the hobby that it's documenting and is giving me a little bit of extra to play with too. So again, nowhere near minimum wage, but also a sizable chunk of money, right? Like if I had spent that same time on a different hobby that made me no money, I would have $2,000 less than I have right now, which is significant. So now that we've looked at overall revenue and we've also looked at videos by views, I also thought it'd be fun to look at videos by revenue just to see how those are different. Because like I said, different videos get paid out at different rates with AdSense, and also AdSense just is likely to pay more at certain times of the year, like during the holidays. So while my No Frills Cardigan I'll Be Knitting Forever was the very top of my most viewed videos, it is nowhere on the list of my most profitable videos, in large part because while that's the video that got me monetized, I wasn't monetized for most of the views that it got. The highest earning one is my knitting podcast recommendations video. That brought in $103.55. So these numbers are the ones from YouTube, which means that these are in US dollars, but before the taxes have been subtracted. So it's all kind of mucky. Honestly, I think that it largely converts out the same by the time you've like made the number bigger to make it Canadian, but then made it smaller again to take out taxes. Like it's similar. And then behind that is the winter knitting plans at $118.97, which is interesting because it did worse than fall knitting plans in terms of views, but better in terms of revenue, because again, it went up at the time of year that is most lucrative on YouTube. Just behind it though is the fall knitting plans at $113, followed by gift ideas for knitters at $93, but that one also is where a lot of my affiliate revenue came from, and that was also one of the 2 sponsored videos. So that is actually my highest earning video overall, just between all those different things. Oh, it's also the one where I launched my merch in it. So most of those Etsy sales came from that video as well. So like that one is far and away my most profitable video of the year. Behind that is my Everything I Ever Knit at $77, which is an interesting one because like my No Frills Cardigan I'll Be Knitting Forever, It went up before I was monetized, but because it is a more evergreen kind of video, it has gotten a lot more views in the time since I got monetized, so it's sitting at a decent spot in this list right now. If I had been monetized already when it went up, it would be higher in this list. The next one was just a standard project update podcast episode at $70, but again, one that went up during that like holiday season where YouTube is paying the best, followed by my everything I knit this year at $68. So again, this is the one that I thought would do better than it did, but the algorithm is a mystery. And then numbers 8, 9, and 10 on this list are just a few different like standard podcast update format episodes that are like $62, $55, $53. Let's look at the bottom ones though. So again, anchoring my worst performing videos of the year are all my knits I wore on vacation. No one cares about my knits on vacation. They earned $14.85. Followed by the no frills cardigan I'll be knitting forever. So again, remember, this is my #1 best performing video in terms of views, but just because of timing, because I wasn't monetized yet, it got me monetized. And it's just less evergreen content, so most of its views happened before I got monetized. This one has made $16.11, but we thank it for its service in getting us monetized. And then the third lowest revenue is a podcast episode where I was talking about making my dad socks, among other things. So that one came in at $17. So I just think it's funny to see like the overlaps between these lists and the differences, most notably being the no frills cardigan I'll be knitting forever, and just the seasonality of things and how that affects it. And also just that some things have had more time to accrue views and money than others. Like I'm really curious to see how my everything I ever knit continues to track over time, because there's kind of things working in opposite directions with it. So like it has kind of the most time of almost any video on my channel to accrue views, to accrue money. But at the same time, the longer it's been since I released it, which was now a year ago, the more dated it will become. You can also even see it. Like I was sort of figuring out how to make my footage look better in early episodes. So like if you watch my new stuff and then jump back to that one, like you can just immediately tell it's dated. And I think there's just kind of a tendency with the way we watch YouTube videos to kind of shy away from the videos on a channel that look older and dated than the other ones. Like there's a sense of like, oh, that's like really old. That's not like current or like relevant anymore. And that will only become more true the more time that passes since it goes up. So I don't know, we'll see. So there we have it. That's all the numbers for my first year on YouTube. I'm really curious, like, how does this compare to what you thought? Is this more than you thought that my channel will be making? Is it less? Does it make you want to start a channel? Does it make you go, oh, I was thinking about starting a channel, but absolutely not now? Either way, I hope you've enjoyed being nosy for the last little bit. I've enjoyed letting you. And like I mentioned before, I'm planning to do a part 2 of this video going over all the sort of behind the scenes, like how I set up for videos, what the process is from start to finish, what I've learned in the first year of my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you're not already, but if you already are, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time.